Welcome to the Naked Under the Table show, where we say what we think because we're just as naked under the table as you are. We've got nothing under the table and nothing is off the table. Our weekly golden nuggets are delivered hot and fresh by your favorite half-naked people, Martin, Denise, and Elsie. On this week's episode, we are entering our second of our What If series, and it is entitled What If the Roman Empire Never Fell? And I'm going to turn it over to the host for this week's episode. Bring it on, Martin Johnson.
Yo, yo, yo. So we're here for another week with our What If series, following up on last week's episode. What if the wheel wasn't invented, which was amazing, right? Catch it on Spotify.
Or YouTube.
Or YouTube. So this week we'll be talking about what if Rome never fell. And Rome is a very big topic. Technically, for those, most of you probably know, but Rome was is the capital of Italy, but it used to be one of the biggest empires on the planet. It was also one of the biggest republics before it became an empire. It was founded in 753 by the twins Romulus and Remus, which allegedly were the sons of the god of war Mars.
Clearly non-fiction, Martin? That's a clearly non-fiction history.
Non-fiction. Yep.
They really existed.
And it grew through trade. It grew through what it's most famous for is probably conquest. And it actually became the biggest empire of its time, and spanning the entirety of the Mediterranean. So if you guys have ever seen a world map and you know how the Mediterranean looks, you see all the way around the Mediterranean. That was all Rome. That was all Rome, which made it it had a lot of great functions being around the Mediterranean, and it made a lot of sense at the time also because most of the trading and most of the transporting was done by water. So the Romans generally didn't venture too far into land because they needed to be close to water access for the trade of the Mediterranean. So
Martin,
it made
sorry, Martin, can you refresh? I saw a docu a long time ago on how the Romans started building ships. Was they saw a Eucratian junk ship and they just re-engineered it and built their own thing? Is that real? Is that true?
I have no idea how they built their ships.
A long time ago, I saw this. I think it was Nat Geo, and how they started their shipbuilding was they just saw a Eucratian ship just beached, and what they did, they just fixed it up and retrofitted it and just built a lot of it, and that's just. It just shows how the ingenuity of Rome was. It's
a lot of great inventions and technologies came from all of these massive empires, which we have built. Technically, we built them, or our ancestors built them over the periods of time. Rome, Persia, Mesopotamia, the Mongol Empire, China was actually also Egypt. Very intuitive, ingenuitive for a long period of time.
Right.
So, but today we're going to talk about what happened if Rome never fell, because it did. It did eventually fall. The western part of Rome, which is the one that most people know, which is the one containing Italy, fell about 500 years after the birth of Christ. And the last bastion of Rome, which was Constantinople, fell 1453, but in the 1500s, which actually makes Rome an empire that spanned for over 1500 years, which is
Amazing.
absolutely
That's
insane.
long.
Amazing.
Like
That's
if
just
Amazing.
yeah, like just think about like scientific progress, right? How we've seen, but since the birth of the modern society, that's maybe been
right.
like 200 years, right? Of course
And
it's
look how we
built, it also
progressed.
builds, yeah, but we're talking empires that last for like, this is 1500 years minimum,
That's
right?
long,
Or so that's
man.
insane.
That's insane.
So, but they did fall. What we're going to talk about today is, of course, if they didn't fall. But since the Empire of Rome is so massive and the whole concept of a civilization like that has so many aspects to it, I have done you the favor of cutting it down to three main points, right?
Just
So,
clarifying for the audience, he didn't dumb it down. He just cut it down. All right. In
yeah.
case you guys are mixing up those phrases. Okay.
Um, and we're going to talk about these topics in general in a Roman setting. We're going to talk about how would that live out in today's society. How would society today look? Because we're kind of like taking the pre-definition, or we're assuming that if they didn't fall, we would all be living in Roman times. That's basically the name of the game. Obviously, if you live in the Philippines, maybe you wouldn't have been Roman at this point, but living in Denmark,
You'd
maybe I
be
would have.
Roman.
If you're
Right.
if you're Filipino, your name would be Roman. Romano.
Well, technically, Spain was a part of the Roman Empire, so
That's right. That's right.
It was. And we'll
So,
cover a lot of other things that might have influenced us later on when we get to your
uh,
questions, Marts. Yeah.
but I cut it down into three main topics. So we're gonna talk about the Roman approach to sex. We're gonna talk about the Roman gods, which is technically what we're gonna talk about. Really, is polytheism. Polytheism. Correct me.
Polyatheism.
Exactly.
Polyatheism or
And
polytheism.
then we're going to talk about something that I don't know if a lot of people know. That maybe it's common knowledge, I'm not quite sure, but one of the things that really make Rome so successful was actually the class system that they had. And I'm really looking forward to that part of it, because usually when we talk about class systems, we associate it with something bad, or it is associated with something bad. And today we're going to talk about the class system that actually made Rome, which is the patronage system.
Which was
So
a precursor to our modern government also.
so I'm sure we're going to get to
It's
that,
gonna it's
right?
exciting. It's exciting. I'm excited.
So today we're going to pay tribute to Rome. I hope it's going to be fun. All you guys out there, please feel free to jump in on the conversation, the comments, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. And we're just going to jump straight to it, right? So,
Can you speak Roman?
It's Latin
yeah,
money. It's Latin.
yeah,
Latin?
exactly. It's Latin,
you
man.
can you
So
can
if
you
you
can you
speak,
say
if
can
you
you
speak any Latin language,
Latin?
you're good, man.
Yes.
Do
In
you remember what we
Via
talked about the
Veritas.
last time after the show? What word they might have been? Anyway, we're not gonna get into that. We're gonna jump into the first question, right? So Romans were actually very libertarian when it came to sex, and it's very likely that they've gotten this from the Greek, and we'll talk a little bit more later about the association between the Greek Empire and Rome. But they were actually so free that it was not uncommon to display pornographic images in art, in writings, poetry, any type of literature, plays, and whatnot. They were literally known for orgies and adultery. They were known to be open to homosexuality, right?
They would have sex
And
in front of servants and stuff like that. In fact,
and
that's
with
how openly practiced.
servants,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
openly practiced. Yeah.
So they were really open about this. And before we dive into that, I want to say actually, and this, I think it adds something very cool to that discussion, is that they were actually also practicing divorce. The Roman Empire actually practiced divorce, and the divorce could be sought both by the man and
And the
by the
woman.
woman.
Yeah. In fact, I'll get there
So
later.
that's it. That's a good
I'll
little
get there
one,
later.
huh? So my question is, the first question: if Rome never fell, do you think that we would have been more open to sex? Do you think well, we are more open now, but do you think we would be Roman
Even
open to
more
sex,
so.
and how would that look like? So
Even more so, no?
you're the romantic person here, LC. So I think we should dive into that.
Wow. Okay. It's a funny thought when you think about what if Rome never fell, and with the influence, the massive influence that Rome has. And you're right, they were very much open in sex. I was watching this documentary a long time ago, and it was about one of the first malls. It's their first ever mega mall. They
Yes,
call
they're
it
Yeah,
the
really
yeah,
good at
yeah, yeah.
that.
Trajan, the
They're
Trajan
phenomenal at
market.
that.
Right,
Yeah.
the Trajan market. And in the market, you can do a lot of things. You can get a spa, a massage, and I'm sure in those baths, in those public service baths, you can get some sex. You can get something going there,
You
and
can
that they
have
were
your
known for
happy
that.
ending, as it
Yep,
were.
they were known for that. And yeah, you're right, Martin. And a lot of the the house lords, the dominus, would just have sex with anyone they want. It was just a more
Basically,
so than
their
any.
whole
It was just
staff,
a chore.
their whole staff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Their whole staff, and for the slaves, it was just a chore for them to, okay, I'm gonna
Mm.
have to suck my master's dick, and that was just something that they do on a daily basis, I guess. So it's gonna be crazy to think what would happen if that carried over to the modern world, and Rome never fell. Would it change? Would we have some sort of a jurisdiction on that in the modern world?
I
Are
would
we gonna?
definitely be some big lords boy
I
toy.
know,
I'm sure,
I know.
man. I'm sure.
I would. Yeah, I would. I'll theorize something, and and reading your question a while ago, I was thinking I'm gonna do my own theory now. I'll call it the Caligulary theory, and probably, I guess, if Caligula never also fell and and he flourished, that that crazy emperor flourished, we would probably have we would probably have a booming population. I guess would be more than we'd be more than
Yeah.
10 billion people in the world right now. Probably double that. We would probably have problems now with overpopulation, even more so now than if it never happened. So that's gonna be a problem. Sex would be more rampant. Maybe would develop AIDS a lot earlier than
Or maybe
than
that would
now.
have eventually been the Roman Empire's fall. Did you ever think about that?
Could be. They would probably not call it AIDS. They'd be probably call it Juno sickness or Jupiter sickness
Jupiter's thickness. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Jupiter
What
or
about
locust.
you,
the
Denise? What
or the
about you, Denise?
Saturn virus. I don't know. They can call it whatever. It's gonna be scary. It's a scary thought. It's a scary thought, and how it's gonna carry over in the modern world, and if it's gonna probably be so much different. I guess toga parties would be so common, and having and if that carried over in the modern world, we'd be still wearing togas. That would be I could say
Oh, that would
easy
be
access.
cold, man. That would be super cold.
It would well, we'd be
Not
kind
over
of high
here.
tech. Not
No.
over here. Over there probably, but I guess we would develop some sort of thermal cloth that would
Thermo
probably
toga. A thermo
a
toga.
thermal
Yeah,
toga. Remember, Rome was very ingenuitive. They would
man. We seriously have to make a web shop with all the stuff that we invent on this show.
they you know
Man.
what? You know what? That's a good idea. We should list everything down and put it on the groups, our
Yeah, we can
Facebook
make like an
groups, and our
Yeah,
incubator.
page,
you got that
It'll be like an
Q. You got
incubator.
that. You're noting that down.
like a white paper of sorts, and just put it out in our page or our YouTube groups, guys. We have actually a YouTube groups. Join us. It's called the Nuts Group, and we just talk the things that we're talking about here, and we just theorize things. And yeah, going back to the rampant crazy sex that we're gonna be having in this modern age, if My God, if Caligula flourished and he'd put up his own university, the Caligula University, that he'll probably be teaching. Man, I'm telling you, the Kama Sutra has nothing
Yeah,
on
that
Caligula.
nothing.
Nothing on Caligula.
Eh, Denise, what about you? Where are you at? What if Rome never fell? How would sex and pornography and all of this stuff in today's society? How would it look?
Well, I think it's kind of awesome that this question is coming during Pride Month. Because one of the things I admired so much about Roman culture was they didn't see, it wasn't just sex that they saw very openly, it was gender that they saw very openly. In fact, the Roman culture was one of the only cultures in the world where women were not only equal to men, very often they were considered above men. They were revered, they were worshipped. And in these orgies, I mean, a lot of the history talks about male against male. And I think the reason history is written that way is to shame Rome, because when Rome fell, the very conservative historians were like, that's why it fell. You see, that's why it fell, because they were engaging in same sex, yeah. And of course, they were going to use men as a example, but the women were doing it too. Women were making out and having sex with each other as well. And I think if Rome never fell, a lot of the woke movements that we have today, not just when it comes to sex, but even gender identity, might not even be necessary. We might not even have labels for things. We would need to fight for labels for things. We would need to explain, I'm gender queer, but this and this and this. And I think our view on sex would be, because our view on sex would be so open, we would spend more time focusing on what makes a person, their intellect, their characteristics, their personality, their achievements, and less about, oh, she's a woman though, and she's a boss. Is she a bitch, or is she, and all of those little things that come together now with the conservatism that fell together when Rome fell, or the liberalism that fell.
Liberalism.
It's so hard to say. But I think, yes, to answer your question more succinctly, we definitely would be more open about sex, about gender, and about that sex is not just for procreation. Sex would be for entertainment, for pleasure, for as a pastime, even as a form of worship. I think is what would happen now, because we have a very different view on sex, and I think that would be kind of awesome, because I think in many cultures today we're very backward about it, and that really affects how we see each other and how we see what is fair in terms of pleasure and worship and all of that jazz. Yeah. Liberalism. Ha! I got it.
Yeah, yeah. I like
Caligulism.
I like to think about. Yeah, I like thinking about sex. Like, I mean, who doesn't? No, I think it's a very fun thing to like talk about and to think about, and also in many ways it's also a serious topic. Although we can have fun with it, it is also a serious topic. And so I'm not a historian, so please don't hang me if I'm wrong. But the more
Or
conservative
or
views,
more appropriately, Martin, crucify you, because Rome
yeah,
crucifies people. Never mind.
yeah, that's right, that's right. But I would probably, I mean, it's a lot cooler to get crucified than to get hanged. you know but we could,
Spartacus.
yeah, well, but we'll take that on another podcast, man. Getting hanged is like you're hanging there, and but crucified, you're at least, you're like, you
Spread
take some
eagle.
pain, and yeah. All right,
I don't
Denise,
know,
you're not.
man.
You can
I
pick your
really don't
own
know
way.
that.
You go. You are with
You
the hanging people. I'm with the
you die
crucifying
fast or you
people.
die slowly. It's really up to you.
Yeah, because hanging, you can die fast. If you snap your
Right.
neck, you're
Snap
dead.
your neck.
Yeah,
I'm
but man, you're
there.
just hanging there, looking like a rag doll.
Okay, all right, but okay, you were saying
And
oh yeah.
anyway, but I think a lot of the conservatism when it came to sex, if I'm not wrong, came out of England. right? I think it's a lot. It has a lot of influence from English. Is it Victorian? The Victorian times? I'm not sure, but and that's what I like. That's how I remember it. In any case, and I find it interesting to think about how would the world be if that part of our culture had been different, which or similar to the Roman. Not that it would have necessarily been better than it is today, but how would it have been different? And there's a lot of ways. Like one of the first things I thought about when I read about this was just like, you know how we use sex in commercials nowadays, right? Imagine if we didn't have the conservative part in us and it was Roman. It would just be an all-out orgy commercials when you went out of your house. You know, like people will have like orgies on their walls. You know, um, and I find, like, thinking about that, I find it funny. But then I also find, then the conservative part of me said, yeah, but what about your kids, right? Because a lot of people often try to protect their kids from pornographics, like not exposing them to pornographics or that part of or the sexual part of life too early. And if you live in a society where all of this is just out in the open, like how would that if affect raising children, right? So that was also something that I was thinking about. Not that I have an answer to it, but it was just a thought that came in my head.
The man of the household back in the Roman times had mostly a lot of control. They would sell their children sometimes to slavery. It was a common practice back then. It was horrible. Those are things that I hope doesn't carry over to the modern world.
Well, if you're asking me personally, because I am a parent, and I think, when we use the word pornography, that's like using the word media. It's a very vast and varied collective of possible images, representations, etc. And I think obviously there are certain types of pornographic material that would be not suitable for children. But I think the way the Romans did it, it was really meant to be embracing what is natural, what is completely human. And they weren't trying to make it dirty, and they weren't trying to make it something to be ashamed of. And I think personally, if that would have been an outcome of Rome never falling, I'd actually appreciate that. I have very open talks and I've always had open talks with my children about sexuality, sex, and these things. And many parents, I think, might have been more comfortable having those talks had it been more societal in nature and not necessarily their sole responsibility privately to educate their children about these things. And I think that's a very interesting point that you bring up, in that if it's societally accepted that sex is not only a part of life, but it is a good thing, then the burden to educate your children when and how is removed from the parents. And then everybody has the same purview about this thing, which I think is also wonderful. I think part of the reason why there's so many conflicting opinions and so many woke movements and just so many antagonistic sides about sex, gender, and the like is precisely because people were raised in different households, in different cultures, in different societies. And I imagine if we were raised in a more collective view about it, a shared view about it, it wouldn't be as animositous as it is today. I think I just invented a word, animositous.
Yeah, but we are many things, and inventors are definitely one of them. That's for sure. Yeah, I was just thinking, because also what, like, the way I was thinking about it was also one of Freud's big points, and that one of, at the time that he lived, one of the most suppressed part of the collective human psychology and mind was the sexual drive, right? And we know for a fact that suppressing the sexual drive in you depending on to which extent is unhealthy. So where would we have been, and how would it have been
Even destructive
if
sometimes, not just unhealthy, even
yeah
destructive. I
yeah
agree. I agree.
yeah
Maybe
so
maybe cornflakes wouldn't get invented. You know that cornflakes wasn't. You know that cornflakes was invented to suppress sexual urges. I'm
no.
not. Kellogg's invented it to suppress sexual urges from Catholic
But I
from
gotta
kids.
I gotta give it to them. When I eat cornflakes, it suppresses all my urges, man. The only one it doesn't suppress is my puke mechanism.
Yeah, good in fiber,
Yeah, man.
especially
That's
if you add nuts.
you should add nuts
Touche.
to your cornflakes.
Touche.
Yeah. So yeah, it's fun to think about how where we would have been, uh, and I think it could also tell us something about where we're going, because now we are in a society where maybe not the act of sex itself, but talking about it and having different wants and different needs and different preferences are getting more widely accepted. So hopefully, I guess hopefully
We
we
come full
will,
circle. Yeah, we come
yeah,
full circle.
We go back to Rome.
we'll get to see how it would have been. If we're lucky, we'll get to see how it would have been, and then maybe
Uh,
it's for the better, maybe it's for the worse, but we'll know when we get there. We'll know when we get there.
Caligula will live again.
Mhm.
His ancestor.
And that's when you make the Caligula. What's he called again? That
I can't
guy.
remember what did I said. What did I say a
You
while
make
ago?
his. You
Calig-
become the principal at that university,
yeah,
Elsie.
the Caligula University. That would be crazy.
All
He'd be
right, all right.
teaching
We're gonna jump
exactly.
on to the next one. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the gods of the Roman Empire, and I find this interesting because actually all of us grew up in parts of the world where monotheism is the prevalent religion, meaning a religion with one god, meaning that the at least one of the ground pillars of which our
Or
society
one higher being, not
yeah
necessarily one god per se, but one higher being.
yeah
Yeah.
which means that the cultures that we live in, one of the ground pillars of it, which would be religion, is has the influence of the monotheist religion, right? So basically, the Romans got their polytheism, and they have about 12 gods. They have a little bit more, but about 12 main gods, and it came from the fact that actually they copied their system. They're a bit lazy, but they copied their systems from the
Greek.
Greek. And the story about that is actually really fun because it links to the Iliad by Homer, which is the story of
I
Troy.
like it how he says Homer. Sorry.
Yeah. It's very
Homer.
French. Homer.
Um, so the survivors of Troy were allegedly the ones that discovered Rome in this narrative, and that was why that was why they simply brought the same gods with them to Rome.
Right.
So the question goes: how do you think the world today would look like if we did worship the Roman gods? And it doesn't have to be too specific, but think about a polytheist system where you have different gods for different
Almost everything.
how do you even
Areas of
say that?
life,
Yeah,
worship, needs, etc. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. And let's talk about how the world would look like if that was the case. So Denise, take the floor.
I'm happy I'm doing it first because for those of you who've been listening in for a while, you know that there was a time in my life I practiced Wicca. And a lot of the gods that we would pray to and worship were actually derived from the Roman and Greek gods. And the reason that was a humility to accept that um, even though they were called gods, they were derived from earthly concepts and a little bit celestial, but still within the sky, still within the sky, the earth, the sea. And what I personally loved about that is it made it easier to relate to them. In fact, that was one of their appeals, is that they were they had a human side to them, almost human-like characteristics. They would get angry, they would get jealous, they would get spiteful, vengeful, they would get horny and want to have sex, and for me, what I liked about that is they became a little bit more relatable. And I think what's happened in monotheistic religions is it was intended to really separate humankind from whatever deity it is that we're worshiping, to
to
remind
create
us,
like an unobtainable ideal of sorts.
or more to humble us. I think the
Yeah.
intention was to humble us, and so that as we went through life, whatever our version of life was, whether you were Buddhist or Christian or Muslim, the idea was to aspire towards something. You may never actually attain it, but the
Yeah.
idea was to aspire to become like it. So that's why, at least in the Christian dogmas, there's to be Christ-like. But when you have multiple gods, especially divided the way they were divided, they were more relatable in a way. And that for me was also nice because it reminded you that you as a human could do and be many things. There were even these concepts of demigods, where an actual deity or a god would have a spawn or a child with a human. And so they were half god, half human. And those were the heroes of the age. The gods weren't actually heroes. The gods were folklore, myth. Sometimes they were actually just pains in everybody's asses because they just caused all this rife and chaos and stuff. But the demigods were always considered heroes. And what I liked about that was it gave us something to aspire to that was attainable. And I feel that if we still had this polytheistic sense of worship, we would find a god of choice, which was usually the practice, a god that we either aspired to be like or felt we were most like. And we would develop characteristics, personality traits, attitudes, work ethic that went along with that god's practice. And for me, why that's awesome is you're now a lot more forgiving about yourself, and you now have a strong sense of self-worth that doesn't always have to come from self-actualization. It actually comes, so now your self-worth is half inwardly brought about and half outwardly pulled, and I think that would be wonderful. I'm a Christian, so obviously I'm not going to debate on which religion is better, but to answer the question, if polytheism was alive in the world today, I think you'd have a more balanced perception of the world, a more concrete sense of self, and everybody's worth and self-confidence would be much clearly defined, even from a very young age. And that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I think you have a very great point. I think it was a very, very great analysis. Um, because we all have preferences, we have different preferences, and we have different personality traits, and it's very difficult for someone who worships. It's very difficult in monotheism to associate yourself or believe that you can become better if the values that dominate that religious structure is not values or traits which inherently you have in yourself or you see in yourself. So therefore, I really appreciate. That's a very, very good point, Denise. That's a very good point. Elsie, what about you?
If we had the pantheon of gods up to now, and we'd it. Well, I guess there's gonna be a lot more multitasking. I mean, it's not gonna be
That's true too.
not gonna fall under one guy, diba? I mean,
Oh man, I have to farm now. Gotta pray to the other dude.
But maybe they would also
I'm
be
sure-
way more, effective because they could divide the work.
I guess Jupiter can just hang loose, right? Because I've got my pantheon, I got my group doing all the all the stuff that needs to be doing. I got a guy just for wine. God damn it! Come on, Bacchus, do the parties, do those orgies. I got Janus, I got Saturn, I got things covered. Jupiter, I'm just the boss. It would be great to be Jupiter in that sense. Well, yeah, socially, more or less, we still have that. I mean, even if you're Catholic, we still have the saints. We still pray up to the saints still. Uh,
Very good point. Very
in a
good
lot of,
point.
we still have baby Jesus. I don't even. We
Yeah,
still
so
have,
if you're a baby, you definitely have some
right,
onto.
right. There's a kid Jesus, and there's a
Yeah.
Nino, and there's a
Yeah.
baby
Santo
Jesus, and
Nino.
there's a
Yeah.
black Jesus, and there's so I
You
guess
know, that's yeah.
we still
I
have it,
just wanted to say that that was the first time I ever saw a black Jesus. That was in the
right?
Philippines.
Me too.
Yeah.
When I was
See,
a kid, I got
we were more diverse in our worship than most people recognize, to be
right,
very
right,
Yeah.
honest with you, you know.
right, right,
But back to Rome and what it would have been like if it didn't
right.
fall.
Yeah.
It probably, I don't think it would change much. I think we would still be worshiping, let's say Jupiter would still, but then again, remember, Rome turned Christian, right? It was unified in Christianity. So
Eventually, yeah, but that was
eventually,
late. That was
Constantine,
Yeah.
later
Yeah.
on. Yeah,
right?
that
Yeah.
So
was
let's
the
so if
Constantinople area. Yeah,
right,
Yep.
Constantine and Constantinople.
so if Constantine never merged the religion, and we'd still be worshiping Jupiter, I don't think it's going to be much of a change. I think it's just going to be, there's just going to be more statues. There's just going to be more pictures, more prayers. There's probably a prayer for every god out there.
Time consuming. You're saying it
That's
will
going
be
to be
more
more
time.
time consuming.
But there are prayers for the saints too. There are prayers
Right,
for
we
each of
still,
the saints
right,
too. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, Denise. So it's
Yeah.
not that much change because we have prayers for our saints. I mean, well, I'm not practicing, but I'm born Catholic. So I don't think it's not that much of a change. What I know of is, since the three of us are bar folks, we would probably pray to Bacchus a lot,
Yep.
more so than any.
No, are you kidding? Bacchus would come down from Mount Olympus. Sorry,
And
not
drink
Mount
with us.
Olympus. Sorry, because that's Greek. But
That's
Bacchus
Greek.
would come down and be like, "Yo, my besties, what's up? Let's
That would be
hang."
amazing. He'd look like Martin. If Bacchus was a personification of on Earth, he'd be
He would
Martin.
come down from
Really?
Mount Vesuvius.
Vesuvius. Oh goodness. Let's hope it didn't erupt. Oh, that's another what if, right?
Oh, what if Vesuvius never
that's another what if.
erupted?
Yeah. But
Pompeii,
I wanted to build on what Elsie said, because he also makes a very good point about, did it really change so much? I started my answer explaining that maybe the reason we created a monotheistic set of religions is to create a larger divide between the deity and the human beings. But we didn't really escape or eradicate the practices of not even Roman, but old time cultures and societies. We still assign certain representatives to be the guardians of certain aspects of our life, and in that
and
sense,
not just Christian, Denise, and
But
other religions too.
the value structure did change though.
Right.
it did,
Right,
and I think,
right. So
and,
that's really where it lies, because that was where you made a very good point, Denise, that the gods of the now of the Roman system were more human, in the sense that they were very much victims to jealousy, anger.
They were as petty as us, and
Yeah.
I think,
Where
and
saints,
that's
even
and, right.
saints, although they have different areas, they become saints because
they're benevolent.
technically
Yeah,
they were benevolent, they were
yeah,
pure of sorts, right? So it still creates, well, let's, no need to get too technical, but it still suppresses that jealous, angry part of you, or that part of you that makes you incomplete,
or at
or
least
impure.
it makes you judge the parts of yourself that are innate and natural. You know, what
Uh,
if you were born kind of a chaotic dude, and you're mischievous, and you're a little bit naughty? You know, in monotheistic religions, you have to kind of quelch that and keep it down. You know, and but sorry, I guess I agree with you, Martin, 100% that when Rome fell, what it really was a push for a more stringent value system and a very one-dimensional, unforgiving value set. I guess the reason I find what Elsie pointed out is interesting is, did it did we continue to still divide certain areas of worship because we inherited it from the Romans, or because as humans we couldn't let go of it? It's innate in us. We still needed somebody to associate it to. We still needed somebody that was of human construct to relate to.
To
And I,
relate to. Yeah.
yeah, and that's an interesting debate in my head. Like, was it
But
inherited or was it inherent?
yeah,
Was it
so
by
so that's
nature?
a chicken and an egg. Again, a chicken and an egg discussion. But at the end of the day, the I believe it's inherent, because religion at the end of the day is sprung from us. It's our way of trying to explain existence and all its aspects. And if it wasn't from the Romans, like, it goes even further back. That polytheism goes even further back than the Romans. We have always had a need to explain the different parts of the human psychology, of the human mind,
And
and
beyond
manifest it.
nature, yeah, everything, yeah.
Exactly, and manifest it in something relatable, such as personified
Gods.
versions, gods,
Yeah.
deities, right? So I would say it's inherent, but it's a very deep question. It's a very funny, it's a very great discussion, and it's kind of like a chicken and an egg. Um,
Because
chicken
one
and
could
an egg,
argue,
man.
to your point, did the pre-Romans, Greeks and beyond them, did they create all of these gods because there was an inherent need as humans? Or was it just something that they inherited from something that was not documented historically? We don't know. We'll never know.
Or is it aliens? But this is not a what if alien
Oh,
story.
Elsie, he stole your line though. Well done,
Aliens.
Martin. Well done.
Aliens.
Slow clap.
Well,
So
well, they are planetary bodies. So Jupiter
yeah, that's
could be
true,
alien.
man. That's true. He could be an alien. Like, he definitely does not have a human-sized cock. And
A
on we
planetary cock.
go. Yeah, he does, man. That's oh,
So
that's
on that
fun.
note,
Did you ever see the Rick and Morty episode where they have planetary sex? No,
Yeah,
no. Yeah,
it's
man, that's
crazy.
awesome. That's awesome. So the next one, let's go. Next question. So we're
Your
just gonna
favorite.
have a little fun round here, and I'm gonna ask you to pick a Roman god which you like the best and explain why. So, Elsie,
When I
it's
was a
your turn.
kid, I loved Saturn. I think when I was ever most kids loved Saturn because of the rings, diba? And as a kid, I remember I was in love with Saturn. I always thought of Saturn all the time as the ultimate planet. Then you learn eventually that Jupiter, in Roman lore, that Jupiter is the main dude.
the
And you get
king.
kind of like, ah, man, really, Saturn should be the guy. And as a kid, I'm a big Transformers fan, and the biggest villain was Unicron, who looks like Saturn. So it was just badass for me. So I guess Saturn would be one. But if it's gonna be some god that I really really I think is the my favorite would be Janus, because
The
Janus,
two-faced god. Yes.
Two-Face, but he is the god of the beginnings and ends.
Endings, yes. Yes.
So
Wow.
Yes.
being that
Can you
god,
explain that?
you hold the key to the beginning and the end. If that is your responsibility as a deity, to hold the doors that
So
link
what's
the
yeah,
beginning and the end. He's
what's
Wow.
time.
interesting about Janus is Janus was derived from not a Greek god, but a Greek titan,
A
Kronos.
titan.
Yeah, he was
Kronos.
derived from Kronos,
The god of
and
time was Kronos.
the
Yes,
god of
yes.
time. But no, the titan of time, because
The
Kronos was
titan
a
of time.
titan,
Yeah,
not a
titan of
god.
time.
And
Right.
there were a rare few exceptions where the Romans said, generally they said no titans, no titans, but they made a few exceptions. I think only 3 titans made it into
Right.
the
Right.
Roman mythology,
Right.
and Kronos became Janus. But
Good.
yeah, but sorry, as to interrupt, I'm super
No, no,
into
no,
this
no. I'm so
mythology.
interested. I
But the reason they made him the two-faced god, because Kronos was just about time in general, they made Janus the two-faced god, is for 2 reasons. Elsie's point is correct: beginnings and endings. But the second is the concept of regret.
Wow.
Because the two faces, when you look back, you cannot change time. And if you spend too much time looking back, if you spend too
Wow.
much looking back,
Look-
you also miss the future. You
So
also
Ja-
miss the
So
future.
Janus is also the god of regret?
Well,
Is he part of that?
the idea was, and that's why Romans were all about pleasure, about the now, about the
Wow.
present, building for the future. They never looked
Amazing.
back because Janus was a representation of, if you keep looking back, oh, did I do that correctly? Did I say the right thing? I should have whatever. You're spending so much time. That's why it's two faces. So much time looking
Right.
in the wrong direction of time.
Galing.
The wrong
Ang
direction of time. You
galing.
should be looking forward. Always
That's
forward.
amazing.
Always forward. Yeah.
Now I like Janus even more.
Yeah,
I like him even more.
You actually stole mine, so I have to pick a
Oh,
second.
sorry, that's yours also. Sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I originally like Saturn. Diba in Roman lore, Saturn is the god, is the father of Zeus. So they had to make up their own history of their gods in order to in more ways than not overthrow the Greek influence.
So funnily enough, that's the second Titan that they adopted from the Greeks.
Galing.
Yeah.
Galing. Thanks, Denise.
Man, they brought a lot of titans in those boats, man.
They did.
Those boats from Troy was loaded with titans.
I guess. And
What about
togas.
you? What about you, Denise? What's your second choice?
Yeah, so Janus was my first, and Elsie, thank you so much for bringing him up, because I was going to talk about, that's why I called him the two-faced god, but you brought up the idea of beginnings and endings, which is also a very good side. So
That's
we both
amazing,
pick
man.
Janus. He picks Janus for beginnings and endings. I pick Janus for always look forward, not back. At least not back too long. But my second favorite is a little bit of a cheat, because my favorite Greek goddess is Artemis. And so by translation, yeah, Diana is my favorite Roman
Goddess of the hunt.
goddess of the hunt, goddess of,
Man,
and the reason Diana is so awesome is
because you be
Diana,
a predator.
yes, and she was
Yes.
the kind of predator that was not argumentative. She wasn't about war. She was about survival. She was about balance. She was about, there is a place for everything in the world, in nature, in the
She was supposed to be
universe.
Wonder Woman.
Yes, so that's actually why
comic
they
book lore.
named. Thank you, Elsie. Elsie and I are on the same wavelength right now. Like, seriously, that's actually why Wonder Woman was called Diana, because Diana was the balance between the godlike Amazonians and the
Right.
human beings, and she
Right.
had a little bit of both, And so Diana for me was the most human-like god or goddess, which also made her for my favorite. There are no reports of Diana losing her shit, getting angry, getting vengeful, having kids with all of these humans. Diana was actually quite self-sufficient and just existing simply to do what she was made to do. And I think that's a very noble, and very humble thing. All the gods were all about ego and about, I represent this and you gotta notice me and pray to me. Diana didn't even, if I remember correctly, didn't have prayers. She didn't ask for prayers. That's why
talaga.
there are no temples to Diana in Roman history. If I remember my history correctly, because she was very humble. Yeah, so she's my second.
Nice. Yung pala eh.
That's
You have
really
your favorite. Okay na yung sa akin si Janus. How about
Yeah,
you,
you can
Martin?
take the Janus.
that's really great, guys. I love how I prepared the questions, but you're better prepared for the questions than I am, man. That was amazing. Like I was really touched by the explanations you guys came with. A very, very deep picks you have, and the god of beginning and ends. That's just
It's amazing, huh?
insane concept. So I'm a little bit less deep in my pickings, I guess, but I'll pick two because they were not, because I find them interesting, but also because they're very significant for Rome. And how can we talk about Roman gods without talking about Mars?
I knew he was gonna pick that. He's always the Viking. Of course, he was gonna pick Mars. I knew.
Right, right. We have to talk about Mars. Mars was the son of Jupiter, and her name is Juno, right? Of Jupiter and Juno, which is Zeus and Hera, and he was also the one that created. So the myth goes that Romulus and Remus were the creators of Rome, and they were the twin sons of Mars, and they actually have a lot of a semblance to Cain and Abel,
Because
right?
one killed, because
Because one killed the other,
killed the other. Yeah.
and then founded
Romulus killed,
civilization,
right.
right? And then
Romulus killed his
found
brother, right?
yeah, exactly, and then founded civilization. And obviously it's and this is actually something that we haven't touched about in terms of the what if, but conquest for the Romans were massive, which
Yep.
is why they became such a massive empire. And of course their close relation to Mars and the worship of Mars had a lot to do with this as well. Of course, they're acquiring wealth, feeding their population, so on and so forth, fame and whatnot. That also had a lot to do with it, right? But they were closely associated to Mars, and it's hard to talk about Rome and Roman gods without mentioning that guy. And I think if we were to make it like a what if, that would probably have been one of the major complications if the Roman Empire didn't fall. Although they did become more peaceful in time. Having
I will jump in though. I will jump in because in defense of Mars, the god, he always gets a bad rap. People think he's just always fighting all the time, and he's always so abrasive, and he just wants to pick up a sword all the time. But if you really read the mythology about Mars, Mars is very much your character, Martin. He's the kind of person that he doesn't get angry, or he doesn't what do you call it? He doesn't enjoy
Gets even.
conflict. Yeah, he doesn't enjoy conflict. He doesn't enjoy confrontation. He doesn't actually do that. But the minute there is a threat upon his domain, the people that he protects, he gets very, and that's why you call it blood red. Like all he sees is red. That actually comes from Mars. All he sees is red, and you're very much like that. And there's a poetic beauty in that. In that, hey man, I don't want to be angry. Just don't fuck with my people, and don't treat me like shit. And I think that's beautiful. And I think if it stayed the same way today, there would be such great merit for having somebody like Mars as a god.
Didn't Mars get his power from war? As long as there's conflict, Mars gets stronger. Is
Yes.
that's how the lore works?
Yes, but these gods were not always about power. Really, the only ones that were about power are people like Jupiter and those
Right.
guys, right? And Saturn and
the
that.
guys
But
with the big dicks.
But it says a lot. It says a lot about Rome's conflicts, because
Mm.
if they're the sons of Mars, Romulus and Remus, and not just that, they were taken care of by a wolf. So see, everything has
Fed,
they
they were
were
fed
they,
by a wolf.
they were
Yeah, that's
fed
right.
by
yeah,
wolf's milk.
and the reason Mars is awesome is precisely because he didn't seek the power. He didn't seek war. He would get his power because when war would suddenly arise, when it would ensue, somebody had to kind of get shit together. And that's
Get
why
shit
Mars,
done.
yeah. And that's why Mars was like, okay, I will only get powerful when the shit is going awry, and conflict is, happening. And I find it very telling that Martin, knowing his character, associates himself with Mars because he's very much like that. Martin can be very relaxed, very laid back, very subdued. But the minute you threaten
You are?
somebody or something that he loves, he will really lose like his shit, And I think that's very noble. I think it's a wonderful god to pick. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Well, thank you, Denise. That was very nice of you. The last one I actually have, because I cheated a little bit, and I'll do it quick because we also have the last topic left, right? But I think another one which is a good mention is Mercury. And the reason why I'm going to mention Mercury, who's the god of travelers and tradesmen, is because trade was, as it is in many empires, one of the things that keeps everything together. Once you have conquered it, or once you do possess it, creating wealth for the population that lives there, which you do through trade, is usually what in great part helps keeping stuff together. And the reason why I pick him is because there's a scenario of what if, because what happened under the Roman Empire was that the Roman Empire made Northern Africa one of the richest regions in the world. And they did
So
that
what if?
because
Yeah.
and they did that because that was where the whole empire, the Roman Empire, got their agriculture from. So if the Rome never fell, because what happened was after Rome fell, North Africa became one of the poorest regions in the world, and still to this day, it's not the poorest, but it's one of the poorest. And they also have a lot of problems. They have a lot of problems in general, like we do many places on the planet. But if Rome never fell, we would probably have seen a whole different
Northern
Africa.
Africa.
Yeah.
That is an amazing analogy, Martin. That is amazing, amazing, amazing. It's, I mean, on one hand, I totally get it because you're really business minded and stuff. But on another hand, that what do we call it when we make tuhog? What is tuhog in English? When you string things together and they make logical sense. That is a wonderful analogy. You should write a paper on that. It's awesome.
Now we're gonna jump on to the last part, right, guys? So we're gonna go and we're gonna talk a little bit about the class system which Rome was built on, which is the patronage system, right? And this is gonna be a little bit technical, but we'll try to make it as fun as possible. But basically, what they did was they divided the population into two main categories. There were more categories, but two main categories, which was the patricians and the plebeians.
The plebs.
And the plebs. And
The
the
lowest one.
patricians were the overclass, right?
Yep.
They were the minority. They were the political office. They were able to hold political office. They controlled land. They did all of this. The plebs were the cultivators of land. Right? They were the cultivators of this land. And in its essence, you look at the system, like you look at many, like people might know the caste system of India, which has a lot of bad rep, but also know the more modern version of it, which is like the one that Karl Marx basically laid the foundation for, which is the worker against the overclass. The thing about this specific system, it did create a very clear division of rights, a very clear division of people. But the way that what they did do was that it was up to each plebeian freely to choose his own patron.
Yes.
So that effectively, and I
There's
might assume a little bit here, but that effectively makes it, especially under the Republic, even more. When they became an empire, a little less, but it effectively makes it a class-based, like semi-democracy, right? Not everyone has equal vote, but it is not controlled from.
It's not a fixed system. Yeah.
It is in terms of the classes are fixed. The plebeian cannot become a patron, but the plebeian. So there's the competition element gets added into it, which basically creates not an equal society, but a more you have more influence over your situation.
Can I add something? That divide was so thick that even intermarriage with the plebs and the pats were illegal, but when they were starting.
Yeah.
But as we
You
go
would
on
be
with this
exiled.
right,
Yep, or
but as we go
executed.
on with this, what the good news is, as we go on with this conversation, in Roman history, things changed after a couple of years too. So
a
that's
couple of 100 years.
that's a long time, but it changed. It actually changed, and
it did.
it's a great change because it influences our
Yeah.
our system now. It's a
So
precursor to it.
so you already jumped into it. So let's just drop the question. What do you think about the system? About this system, and how do you think it compared to the political system today?
Well, yeah,
Right.
we all
So
know
you
it's
can
the.
just go ahead. You just continue, Elsie. You are already
Yeah.
going down that path.
Sorry. It's a great. I just saw, well, a couple of months back. I really saw a great docu about that, and it's such a. I can't remember for the life of me. I can't remember the name of the channel, but anyways, it was a great documentary, yeah, that system was such a divide. What's great about it, though, is the plebs. Let's just call them plebs and the pats. No, the plebs
Mhm.
had somewhat of an influence to choose their pats, but they had the
Patrons. Let's call
assembly.
them
Sorry,
patrons because they were
I think that's
actually
what they're called.
yeah,
I think I'm
patrons.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Martin. Were they? That's what they were called. The assembly. I think the plebs had like a jury with them, and they were the majority. There were a lot of them, and they represent the working class. So because of that influence, they still had the majority's vote. Still, the 1%, the aristocrats were still the pats. But after a while, things changed.
Patrons. Can we call them patrons? Because that's actually the
Pats,
yeah.
the
Although
pats.
I guess
Kasi
we can call
plebs
them
eh.
The
pats.
pats and the plebs.
The
Sabi
pats.
mo kasi
Okay,
Denise
okay,
plebs
okay,
eh. I like
okay.
the plebs.
Okay. I started with the plebs. Okay, okay, okay.
Let's keep it na. Plebs na. So the plebs. I lost tuloy my train of thought.
This is where you walk into a door and you're like, "Damn it, Denise! See what you did to yourself."
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead. Elton. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So where was I? So what's great about it and how it was influenced by how it influences our system now. Our system, more or less, well, except India, more or less, we can, even if you're born plebs or pats, we can actually, work our way up to the ladder, up the
Mm.
ladder, and eventually, you're right, Martin. After so many years, that changed. Plebs were actually getting higher in rank, which to the point that some of them even became consuls to that point, and consuls was the highest ranking in that
And
system.
also, it's important to say that just, I mean, as you say, pointed out in the beginning, the plebs, there was a clear divide. But also, the thing is that although you have to pledge yourself to a patron, that doesn't mean that just because you're a pleb, you can't be more wealthy than the patron.
Then the patron,
And that
exactly.
and that
Yeah.
wa- that was what happened because later on, a lot of the plebs got really, really rich. They got
Because they were
because
better at what
they,
they were
they
doing than the patrons were, and the patrons weren't paying attention.
and,
So
and, and they were
yes,
and a
ma'am.
lot of them were landowners also, guys. They were
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
landowners,
yeah,
so they
yeah,
had
yeah.
land. They were actually expanding.
They were traders. They had land. They yeah. So anyway, Denise, what are your thoughts?
So I have to caveat that when I answer this question, this is not by any means my saying that this system is what we should have today. We're going on the what if, right? What if it
Yeah,
was still today?
it's a what if, huh?
It's a what if, guys. So, don't shoot me for my opinion. I think that there were many merits in a system like this. I know that you could not cross over to become a patron if you were born from the plebeian class, but because of the nature of, and you said it yourself, Martin, the nature of the competition, the nature of the opportunity that you were seizing, it almost feels like they had a higher impetus to do well, be better, find better opportunities than people in a true democracy today. There are many democracies where those born in a lesser class either feel that they need to be protected or provided for by an institution, maybe the government or other such things, and they don't necessarily, I'm not speaking generally here, I'm using some they don't necessarily push themselves because it's a pure democracy and anybody can just cross over that proverbial line. In that system, you had a ceiling. a glass ceiling, but there was a clear ceiling. And when you have a limit, when you have a boundary to what you are allowed to do and you are allowed to be, it seems to me that it pushes you to reach that ceiling a lot more than when the ceiling doesn't exist, when opportunity is limitless. I don't know if it's because in true democracies they feel overwhelmed by that limitlessness, that the ceiling doesn't exist, or that they feel lost as to where they're going to begin, because at least in the Roman system it was very, very clear: to get up in the world you need to find a good patron, and to find a good patron you need to blah 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 and this and this, and that definitive ladder, I guess, if I must use it, of your self-actualization and your ability to become better, I think worked out. And so I'm wrestling with the idea that maybe it's possible that true democracy today is actually preventing people from being more competitive, more driven, more ambitious, because, and it's a psychological fact, when you put too many options in front of a human being, they just stop. They get overwhelmed and arrested, and then they just shut down. And I don't know if the system, to Elsie's point, it did evolve over some centuries later. It might not be the same thing today as it was during the height of the Roman Empire, but I think there was merit in the intent. There was merit in the intent, and again, don't shoot the messenger here. Just, it's my opinion.
Yeah, and I think so too. And it's also important to remember that this system also originates from the time where Rome was a republic. And Rome was a republic for a very long time, and it didn't become an empire until later on. And even when it did become an empire, you can still make an argument that the emperor was still a patron, meaning that the patrons would support the
He was the
emperor. So that,
patron of the patrons. Yeah,
yes,
essentially.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So that basically the system was built for the people that live in it to have a say in it. And however, you can always argue, of course, you will never have, as an individual, you will never have a lot of influence on a society. Even in a democracy, you can have a voice, and depending on your platform and whatnot, maybe the value of that voice can raise. But at the end of the day, you have one vote, and if that vote goes the other way, then
Or is
that
wasted, or is wasted.
yes,
Yep.
then that was the end of your saying things. So when you talk about gathering people on such a mass scale, the control of the whole, the individual's control of the whole is always limited. And at least in the system that the Romans paid, or did create, there was the element of competition, meaning that you were free to pick your patron. It might not have been a super democratic or a super like libertarian society in terms of freedom to move between layers. But it did add the competition, and it did add people to did give people free choice.
And to a
And I
to a degree, Martin, you know how there's that saying, the minute you tell a person they can't do something or can't be something, they fight harder. And I think that is sort of what happened. There was an awareness that they couldn't cross that line, but I think there were many of them that tried and saw what would happen if I pushed it to the breaking point. And to Elsie's point, I think that's why eventually, centuries later, it had adjusted. And maybe the Romans knew more about human psychology than we even do today when it comes to motivation, persuasion, and inspiration.
I think a lot to do. So I'll jump in also. A lot to do has to do with the sheer number. The assembly, the plebs were just there are just a lot of them. So that you have to put that in account. Talking about talking about the classes, the lowest one was slaves, and it was a horrible system, true enough. But during that time, the assembly even thought of putting clothes, giving them a uniform of sorts, so to distinguish their class. Then they took that out instantly, for the mere fact that they don't want slaves to know how many are they in number, for the fear of revolt. Spartacus, anyone, right? So these are crazy times during the Roman Empire. But
So, and
strange
that
times.
that point that you just made actually echoes Martin's point,
Right.
because Martin was talking about this push for, in that competitive nature, you're pushing for individual success, individual opportunity. And when you brand people collectively, you remove that individuality. And maybe that's why Martin's thought on it, where the competition, it's really about the competition, was the key to it all. It was cutthroat.
Yeah, and I mean, in that way, it carries similarity with what Western society is built on today, and not only Western society, actually, uh, most places in the world, like you see it winning territory, well as Asia, in Asia, and and I don't know if that came specifically from Rome, but I just found it very interesting when I read about the patronage system, patron system, and and I mean, it did work out for them for a while, but obviously there's also a lot of bad stuff, right? But again, the concept of slaves, like anywhere in the world at this time, had slaves. Like
Some form
everything,
of it. Yeah, yeah,
like
you're right.
we didn't have machines, we didn't have the technologies we had today. Anything that needed to get done, you needed manpower. And the only way to get sufficiently and cheaply get manpower was through slavery, conquerage, and slavery, and basically any big civilization, both before and during this time, and also other parts of the world, like in it was massive. Slaves were massive in Northern Europe as well, during
But
the Roman times.
I would argue that it wasn't entirely slavery, because you could make a fortune. You could make a fortune as a pleb. So it wasn't
No,
slavery
but
in the
the
traditional sense.
plebs weren't slaves. Like the slaves would work for the plebs,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
But you
but I
can
guess
buy,
if
but you
we're
can buy your freedom, diba?
Yeah, you
There,
well that they actually had a big, so they actually had, and Q made this point also. They did actually free. I don't know how many of their slaves, but it was a thing to free their slaves. So it was not like you would be a slave forever. And actually, a fun fact is that if you were to be in the Roman army, you could not be a slave. They did not have slaves in the army. So any slaves that were recruited to the army automatically became free men. But in any case, there's a lot of goods and bads, and let's not talk about it for forever.
I
Um,
know.
but for those that didn't know about the patron system, uh, go read about it. It's
Very
a
interesting.
great, it's very very interesting.
hence why we're
And
talking about it for so long. Like, you could have
yeah,
so many arguments for or against, and it's a
Ro-
great
Ro-
question, Mort. It's a
Rome is
great
just
question.
interesting, guys. Rome is just a great topic.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this
Yeah,
episode.
but
so
even
it
the way Martin phrased the question is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, brilliant, Martin. Brilliant.
so just as an honorary round, we're just gonna take, because we're already almost out of time, but we're just gonna take
Ah,
a quick round to honor Roman times by just quickly naming the an invention we like from the Roman Empire and why we like it, and then any final remarks if you so desire to utter any, and then we'll call it for tonight. So I can start this time. Right? I haven't started yet.
go for it,
So
my friend.
one invention that I found, which I liked, was actually that the Romans did a lot of the equipment for dental equipment. So they were some of the first that actually did
Oh,
dental
yeah.
equipment. So they started like studying teeth. They did a lot of medical stuff, but a lot of what they did was kind of far out. Like, if I remember one,
Urine.
yeah. So for a
It was a
while
cleaning agent. It was a
they
cleaning
they
agent.
thought they thought that you could cure epilepsy by drinking blood of gladiators,
Gladiators
right?
and liver and eating
Yeah,
their liver.
and eating the liver, right? So, but they actually did do the precursors to today's dental equipment, and that's awesome. Because imagine like just 200 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever, man, 50, 100 years ago, people when they reached like middle age, all their teeth would be gone already, and rotten away or um or whatever.
During
So
that,
thank you, Rome, for that,
you're right,
right?
Martin. During that time, you're lucky to be alive at 50.
Yeah. What about you, Denise?
I like that because earlier you touched on how, some of the British influence kind of quelched the Roman culture. And I think there's a joke here in that the Romans were very good about taking care of their dental hygiene. And this is the punishment you get, Britons, because you guys didn't want to respect the Romans. So you guys got the bad teeth. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. Um, Me personally, I like the fact that the Romans invented books, like books that were bound, because up until that point, most of written literature was in clay tablets,
And
you know,
scrolls.
and scrolls and papyrus and stuff like this. And they were the ones that realized, and yes, they borrowed from the Egyptians because they were like, ooh, this papyrus stuff is cool. But they were the ones that took papyrus and instead of having scrolls, they created bound books, actual books, the books that we know and still continuously use today.
Right.
And for me, that is an immense gift just because a printing press wouldn't have even been invented centuries
Right.
later
Right.
if the
Right.
concept of a bound book wasn't conceptualized by the Roman Empire. And
That's
I
right.
think it's a
That's very right.
brilliant, brilliant
What would
contribution.
happen without books? We'd be still doing the scrolls. Hey, can I borrow your scroll?
Hey, 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 hey,
Comic
hey.
books would be
An
scrolls.
invention, yeah.
What do you do when you go on social media now?
Scroll.
Yeah.
See, the social media really is the awful devil,
It
isn't
it
it?
went it went full circle.
Full
Go
circle,
back to
man.
books, kids. Get a book, buy a book, go to a library. Ugh,
What's
What
a
read a
about
book.
library?
you, LC? LC. So
Well,
tell us what is your invention?
my gosh, there's so many great inventions that Rome did, but for obvious reasons, and I don't need to explain this. It's the latrines. I mean, public latrines. What would we be without them? And back in the Roman times, there were public latrines, and where people, almost 10 people, would sit down together and chat while they do their thing. And here's the cringe, the cringing side of it. They would share a stick with a sponge. That's
Yep.
their bidet. They would share, pass it on. Oh my god. Well,
Okay,
at
but
least
Elsie, you guys need to understand in the audience, Elsie is obsessed with public toilets. He is obsessed with public toilets
we
and the
were supposed to
hygiene
make that.
therein. Yeah.
He has a picture collection of
I
of
have,
poop
I have,
pictures in different public toilets.
I have. I
No,
was
in
supposed to
fact,
put up an app.
yes, Elsie can tell you where the best public toilets are within the city. He knows them. So if you need to go and you want to know, you reach out to Elsie De Leon.
Or you can go to crapp.com. All my stuff are there. That's actually true, guys. Anyways, yeah. So public latrines, and thank God for them. If without that,
Thank
I
God
don't
for
know where
them,
we'd
man.
be doing our thing.
And we would
We'd be
still be
doing our
dying
show.
from. Yeah, we would still be dying from loads of like
Oh my God!
diseases related to eating poop.
Right. And the funny thing is, you know how they clean they clean their latrines with urine. So it was at least a genetic cycle.
Yeah. So
Or-
don't lick the floor, man. Don't lick the floor.
Thank you for that very graphic and concrete description, Elsie. Appreciate it.
So I think I want to thank you so much, guys, for today, and thank you to the audience, the guys that followed. For those who didn't, you can catch us on YouTube or Spotify or here on Facebook. We are a live stream, so you can watch us anytime. I think for today, it's been it's been great talking about Rome. We haven't really covered it before, and I'm sure we sometime in the future will have to talk about other aspects of the Roman Empire. Oh well, we did talk about Mark Antony. We actually have an episode on Mark Antony and Cleopatra. So if you guys are interested in that stuff, you can catch that as well, also on our Spotify and other channels. But it was great, and I love looking back. I love honoring history, and I love imagining what things. It's cool to imagine what things would have been like
Right.
if the Roman Empire didn't fall. Anyway, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you to all that listened, guys. We're working a lot on expanding our platforms and expanding our concept, and we really appreciate all of you guys that are listening, following, commenting, and spending your time with us. So for tonight, I just want to say thank you very much. We will see you next week. Take care. Nuts are out.